one of them brings in when participating. So these actors are normally categorized into 6 groups, the groups being corporates, ESOs, governments, universities, risk capital providers, and startups. And specifically for clean tech, some of the challenges that we have observed at the ecosystem level this time are, first of all, to attract enough diversity and enough critical mass of these stakeholders. So make sure that they are interested in taking part and they see the value in participating of these ecosystems. Then also ensure coordination and alignment so that every one of them has their interests and needs, let's say, exemplified, and also that there's a trade-off between order and coordination. So many times we see that to ensure that everyone's voice is heard, there's a need for order, but at the same time they need the speed to deal with the development processes. And this is a trade-off that we will see how many different ecosystems have dealt with it. And finally, to keep stakeholders engaged, so bridge the gap between promises and theoretical interest to actual implementation and interaction of the different stakeholders. Some key attributes are offering clear value propositions to each one of the stakeholders. So some actors seek capital, others deal flow, others reputational benefits, and it's very important to be very clear and very transparent in offering this communication to each one of them and being very specific to them. Then in terms of governance and culture, we've seen that this is the best way to overcome the trade-off between order and speed. So having a mission alignment and similar values across all of the stakeholders. And this is also very much influenced by the selection criteria when designing or defining who accesses these hubs or these ecosystems. Another key attribute would be to actively manage the communications. This can be in physical events as well as digital ones, and to have an active management of that and orchestration to ensure that it's relevant and targeted to the different stakeholders. And the last one, to measure and communicate. So not everything actually can be measured, but we've seen that publishing relevant metrics is a great exercise to foster accountability and also to show transparency, not just to internal ecosystem stakeholders, but also to the farther or to the community beyond that. And having said that, we're gonna delve into some of the applications of these attributes into different hubs that we have observed. So the 2 ones that we have listed here are the National Robotorium and Greentown Labs. We have already introduced them in previous workshops, but just a quick recap would be National Robotorium being the leading research institution into AI and robotics in the UK, and then Greentown Labs, which is the largest climate tech hub in the world and has presence in Boston and Texas. So what are some of these best practices? So some key aspects are having a flat hierarchy, key value proposition, as we said, tailored to each stakeholder, aligned with the selection process, and also to measure and communicate. For the flat hierarchy, a good example is the National Robotorium, which actually have to deal with a very complex ecosystem. So they have to host scientific experts, robot engineers, technicians, business managers, and multiple different residents every day. And to do so and avoid friction between them, what they have done is to cultivate an atmosphere of respect and cooperation, which has been very much underpinned by a clear mission and transparent guidelines for conflict resolution. And to make sure that this works well, they have a dedicated in-house management team that acts both as a neutral mediator and a facilitator when there's a conflict. And then to ensure that all the stakeholders perceive the value of these ecosystems, a good example would be Greentown Labs. So they have a very collaborative model that integrates a wide range of stakeholders, and they have a specific value proposition for each one of them. So, for example, for the corporates and the startups, they have these joint development agreements where startups can coordinate and develop solutions with the corporates. And an example being Saint-Gobain, the build corporate that has a lasting relationship with an alumni company called Building Envelope Materials, which is focused on advancing insulation technologies, and that has been going on for a few years now. For investors, for example, they have the Greentown Investor Program, which offers curated startup introductions. They also offer deal flow digest to investors and exclusive events like the Investor Activation Series. For academia, Greentown Labs also partners with some institutions like the All-in College of Engineering, and they provide startups access to the talent, and the talent of these universities access to real-world experiences in the startups. And the last stakeholder engagement proposition would be with the government, where they have managed to collaborate and advocate to achieve a grant from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to support getting some capital for underrepresented founders. And all of this is actually supported by the demanding selection criteria that Greentown Labs has. And the way they do it is they do an assessment, which is based in 4 primary criteria, and this being the climate tech fit, the team composition, fit with the community, and the commitment. So if the funding team has provided personal financial investment, or if they are full-time. And all of that is tracked with Greentown Labs impact report, which they publish yearly. And they show some of these metrics, which makes them accountable to show exactly what they've been doing in operational, financial, impact, and also community. So they track whether the number of events that they have performed, what were the number of attendees, and how many of these curated connections led to corporate partnerships, as an example. Now moving into the ecosystem connectivity. Well, part of this clean tech ecosystem success depends on having an active communication and also connectivity among these stakeholders. And here, a leading example that we have found is Norsken, which is maybe not mentioned here. We can briefly introduce it, but Norsken is a leading impact-focused foundation, and they have very strong and structured networking approach, where they host regular events at its innovation hubs, which are spread across Europe and Africa. And they host thematic events, mentorship sessions, industry-specific workshops, and many others in the social aspect. And then they also have digital communication. So they have strong platforms such as Slack, where members can exchange knowledge, share opportunities, and seek rapid advice, not just from the ones in-house, where physical events have better acceptance, but also with the broader community. And all of this is orchestrated via dedicated community managers, which actively identify members and know their interests to be able to promote these connections between members in a very targeted way. So, for example, if they see a startup facing technical challenges, they may connect them with local experts or investors to try and overcome them. And these being some of the best practices we have seen on these 3 main hubs. Then let's move into all of this. How is it funded, and how do we ensure that it's done in a financial, sustainable way? So what are the challenges that we see for funding all of this? The first challenge is the high capital intensity. So these hubs support clean tech startups that tend to be or have high upfront capital costs because of their hardware component. Additionally, also the returns for some of these startups or stakeholders are intangible, indirect, or even they take some time to really materialize, which makes it difficult to demonstrate the return on investment that many stakeholders demand, especially corporates. And also innovation hubs frequently encounter some pressures from funders. So if there's a specific funder that is more important than others or provides more funds, it may threaten the neutrality and push their own third-party agenda into the decision making, drifting away from the mission. So these are some of the challenges that we've seen, and some attributes or ways to address them have been: make sure that you have a diversified funding model, so the sources of funds to be as diversified as possible, and some examples being revenues from memberships, program fees, equity stakes on the different startups in the hubs, having corporate partnerships or grants, and all of this to ensure stability and also reduce this dependency and reliance on single funders. The second piece would be the deployment of these resources. So make it in a way that fits everyone's needs and interests and also aligns with the hub mission. This could be, for instance, making sure that if the hub's mission is to provide innovation in a specific technology, well, to ensure that the companies or the early stage startups have the capability to access the right resources by subsidizing part of the costs. And then in exchange, maybe some other stakeholders like corporates that are more interested in presence or reputation can pay market rates so that they can kind of subsidize the innovation. And finally, the last piece, or something that we have seen adopted by many different hubs, is becoming a philanthropic or non-profit structure. And this allows the hubs to maintain this mission-driven independence. And why so? Because normally when they get this type of backing or sources, it really enables them to focus on more on the long-term vision rather than short-term financial pressures that may come from other sources of financing, like the ones from the private sector. These are kind of the overview, some real-life examples that we have observed. So we have two main hubs here: New Lab, which is a new one that I'm going to introduce, and then Greentown Labs, which we already know about. So New Lab is a space-based innovation platform. It is headquartered in Brooklyn, and what they do is that they build, well, they are funded through a public-private partnership and focus on hard tech sectors like energy, mobility, and advanced manufacturing. And what they do is that they also invest in resident startups as a way to fund themselves. So we're going to briefly walk you through that specific piece. But so what are these best practices? First one being the diversified revenue that we mentioned. So across all of these different options, we'll see that Greentown Labs excels at this. Another would be having tiered fees. So making sure that the pricing is in line with the stakeholder needs and also capabilities. So as we said, if there's an early startup that cannot pay specific rates, we would just reduce them, and in exchange, we would get the money from other sources. The third one would be having skin in the game, let's say, or so having a success link upside. And in this case, many hubs, what they do is to engage with startups by getting small equity stakes in them. And a good example of this is New Lab. So despite having these public-private sources of funds, they also invest in startups that are part of their innovation centers. And whenever the startup gets into a successful exit, they take those funds and they use them to flow back into the platform and provide extra support for the newcomer, so then the upcoming startups joining the hub. And finally would be sponsor assets and programs, which normally tends to be in exchange for naming rights, and also selling some of the expertise or the services that are in the hub, being some examples: prototyping, testing, consulting, or scouting. Then just to cover all of them a little bit, on a very relevant example would be Greentown Labs, which operates as a non-profit, as we mentioned. It has also a very wide portfolio of sources of funds. And some of them are the monthly member fees that they charge for the tenants. They also have corporate partnerships. They receive grants from local players. They have used philanthropic sources of funds for expansion. So when they opened the new hub in Texas, they did it through a philanthropic source of funds. And then also they allow for sponsorships to be able to provide this equipment in exchange for some naming rights. And more specifically, one of the services that they provide is the one which is part of their launch program, where they accept suggestions from corporates to scout technology for them in exchange for a fee. And what they do is they look for the 5, 6 best companies in the world developing a specific technology. They pitch to the corporate, and then the corporate also not just pays for the service, but also pay for the membership to the winning companies to stay 6 months in the hub and develop their technology. These are some of the examples that we have observed. They are described in more detail in the report, but just to get an overview of the funding models. So just following or building on the previous activities, again, we will use the challenges that have been defined in the work package 3 as an input. We already thought of or stated some of the physical infrastructures and the programming, which we believe that today may be very relevant. So when you start answering today's question, think of this physical infrastructure that you thought of in the past workshops and also in these programming and services, and who could be the relevant stakeholder to bring them to life. And the question to answer would be, which are these stakeholders that can help us deliver this system-wide change? And some options being not just restricted to the ecosystem actors that we mentioned, so these 6 categories, but also think of potentially other FINEX innovation ecosystems that could support in bringing these physical resources and programming and services to life. These kind of conversations can be really helpful. I think that if other innovation ecosystems also take a look at this and spot the reds and the greens is a easy way to see where collaboration can really happen, and then taking ideas from the repository that we're going to share. We hope that can be useful as a benchmark. Thanking you for your contributions, for your engagement, and also looking forward to the future and to what's to come with this project and the collaboration among the different innovation ecosystems.